Dmitry, thanks for joining me this morning at SDTS. I really appreciate it.
I'm delighted to be here.
It's great to have you. And gosh, I got excited. I was over at the ASCRA show in Tampa a couple months ago, and we got to see the Virtual Incision platform. It's the first time I had a hands-on look at it, and you're a co-founder of that technology.
I am. We are extremely proud of the fact that we have been able to go really from the garage and how one engineer met one surgeon and decided that this is going to be something we try to do, to really having a prototype and the ability to do a clinical trial.
So that was the birth of it. Engineer meets surgeon, and then who had the seedling of the idea?
It's a great question. It was truly a 50-50 effort. Dr. Shane Ferreter, my co-founder, and I met at a surgical forum for researchers, and the idea was take a surgeon or a medical provider and connect them with an engineer. We literally went out to lunch, and on a small napkin, I drew what I thought would be the future of robotics, which is a little tiny robot that could do one thing only, solve one problem only. And from there, we started doing our research, and from there, we started thinking about what that would look like in a commercial form. We did not think commercial at first. We thought research. And from there, really, is where the ideas came.
And you just recently, I think Q4 of last year, raised a pretty substantial round, 46 million?
That is correct.
All right. And of all places, so I've been in this industry for 3 decades, and when I think about robotics, I think about maybe the Carolinas, I think about the Bay Area, I'll go to Boston, but Omaha, or Nebraska, I should say, not sure that's the hotbed, but as you dig into it, there's a reason for that.
Yes, so, most people, of course, know about the Silicon Valley. Nebraska is really becoming the Silicon Prairie. And where that comes in from is because there's a lot of large university investment into new technology and technology transfer. And I can tell you that the work that Dr. Ferreter and I did early on to develop some of the patents and some of the ideas behind miniature robotics really came from that support. And many of our initial investors into the company are in fact based in the Midwest. So I do think that the Midwest desperately needs this type of invigoration, and I was delighted that I was the beneficiary of that.
And the university has a pretty respected robotics program as well.
Yes, so University of Nebraska is located in Lincoln, which for those of us who play or watch sports know that's where the Huskers play, and Lincoln is about an hour's drive away. And so there's a lot of communication between the medical school and the undergraduate facility and the engineering facility in Lincoln, and really that's where I think a lot of this cross-pollination occurs. And yes, mechanical engineering and robotics at the University of Nebraska is thriving.
And you've used the word miniaturization and smaller format robots. I'll use that as well, and I want to come back to that. But you're still in surgery, and you're still a prolific user of surgical robotics. So give me a sense of the history there with you, hands-on, and not necessarily opinion, but your thoughts about the surgical robotic landscape.
Yeah, I'm a clinician first and foremost. I have patients and I love to take care of them. I perform general and minimally invasive surgery and serve as the chair of surgery at Rutgers University Monmouth Medical Center. I use robotics clinically and have been using robotics clinically since 2001 when I had the pleasure of working on the number 8 install of the then Da Vinci standard system, and have enjoyed the promise of robotics. And the promise of robotics is really to take miniaturization of incisions, not instruments, but incisions, and really allow those small incisions to really get for you what I would describe as the best clinical outcome. When laparoscopy first came on, which was the first iteration of miniaturization of incisions, they were straight stick instruments. They were not easy to use, and many complex surgeries were difficult to teach or frankly difficult to perform. The robotics promise is that we're going to enable that miniaturization. We're going to enable you to reach through a little hole and produce great outcomes.
So you've been exposed to the intuitive platforms. Any others that you've had a chance clinically to use or at least operate on?
The only other, what I would describe as kind of a general surgical robot that's FDA clear currently is the Senhance system, and I've been on that system, not clinically, but in a lab setting, and I found some of the ideas that system brought are very innovative, such as eye control of zoom in and zoom out. Who could have thought? It's like a fighter pilot. And I've obviously had some exposure to some of these other systems that are coming on the market. They're on the market yet, of course. And I think each system solves or approaches a problem in a different way. And cumulatively, they are all creating a tide that's going to float all the boats up together.
And I love to hear that, because oftentimes, probably not the surgeons, but more so the market itself has this overwhelming opinion that one robot has to solve all the problems. And I'm not so sure that that is good for the patient. I'm not so sure that's good for access and outcomes. And these robots seem to be getting more and more sophisticated, overdrive with data, overdrive with towers, overdrive with insights. What's the likelihood of us falling on multi-port or single port as the single answer?
I really do not believe that there's a Goldilocks robot out there. I strongly believe and honestly see that there are so many different problems and solutions for clinical scenarios that no one system, in my opinion, can solve each and every one of them. I think the Swiss Army knife of robotics is probably not the right approach. I think the right approach is to say, what is the problem for this particular system, with this particular specialty, for this particular condition, and let's solve that problem. Again, there are bicycles, there are motorcycles, there are mopeds, they can all coexist.
Yeah, that's true. And so, the 800-pound gorilla in the market obviously is Intuitive. They've done a fabulous job, Gary and his team over there, and continue to evolve and iterate. That platform, as you pointed out, started, 2000, 2001, give or take. But the changing centers of care now most definitely have to have people's attention, because we're moving to these ambulatory surgical centers. We're moving to surgeon-owned facilities, so it's a different buying hat that's on. And we've got venture capitalists, actually private equity now, stepping in there and saying, I get paid with my high-end MBA to force rank what are my expenses, what are my costs per my top 10, how do I start to mitigate or blunt those costs? So how do you think that's going to influence robotics, and how does that inform Virtual Incision's decisions?
Well, the healthcare market in the United States is an evolution, and the evolution started many, many years ago, long before private equities put their foot in, but boy, oh boy, they have a large footprint. Let's go back in time. Let's go back to the time when honestly, all the physicians were in private practice, and then all the hospitals were in competition for those physicians. And then let's move forward now to a much more what I would describe as a corporatization of medicine in America. And of course, in that situation, the bottom line becomes a lot more significant, a lot more visible, not that it wasn't before. So in my feeling, what's happening is the demand for reliable, safe, and yes, cost-effective or value-producing technology is going to be even greater.
So take me through, what is the value prop of virtual? So it's a single port technology. Again, I had the opportunity to play with it at ASCRS recently. So as the co-founder, what has you most excited about it, and especially where healthcare is moving?
Yeah, I think the value proposition of any new robotic technology is to solve a problem. The problem we're trying to solve is we would like to produce a robotically assisted surgical device that will allow the surgeon mobility, dexterity, and safety so that they can perform the operation in any place, whether it's in a large hospital or it's a small outpatient surgical center. Now, that's a large that's a large ask, because all of a sudden you're saying, well, my goodness, how are you going to take this sophisticated platform to a, you know, a little mom and pop shop? And the answer to that is you really have to solve what is the problem that you're addressing. And that problem, in my opinion, is you want to give additional dexterity and additional visualization to the surgeon. And our platform, which is a smaller footprint, a single access system, that is to say it goes through one incision versus multiple incisions, allows us simplicity, frankly. It allows us to not, for instance, need to drape the robot because the robot is sterilized. My goodness, that's a step that you know, most folks that didn't think one would be able to take.
Mm-hmm. And what's your entry point? You're in IDEs right now.
That is correct. So we are in clinical trials through the FDA, and the clinical trial is going well, and we're well into it, and we're very excited that we're performing surgery and learning from it.
And so you're in that IDE. Is there a specific procedure you're pursuing right now that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we went to the FDA and said, listen, you know, we have this technology, you know, here are some things we can do with it. You know, the FDA said, that's wonderful. Okay, for each of those, please submit a separate application for an IDE. And so the IDE that we're submitted first is intestinal surgery. We're operating on the colon. The colon is a large organ. It's not an easy organ to operate on. In the United States, in a paper that my team wrote a couple of years ago, we're still not quite at the all colon should be done minimally invasively stage. About half are done minimally invasively, and the other half are done with a large 12, 18-inch incision. So I thought there was a lot of opportunity there for us, and we're performing right and left colectomies for the standard medical and surgical indications.
So you'll get your clearance there, and then start to move forward with other applications.
That's correct. And the way FDA looks at this is they say, listen, if you're going to operate on the colon, what are all the umbrella procedures that you're going to include in that? So the appendix, for instance, or you know, or the left, you know, or the transverse colon. And so they're very, very, very particular about making sure that we are testing on an organ and a problem, not just, hey, we just want to put the robot in there and do something that we decide on that day.
And then finally, when I think about robotics, certainly we've got 2 soft tissue robotic systems cleared in the US. We've got Intuitive, and we've got Ascensus, formerly known as Transenterix. Both organizations are doing a nice job. Making a robot that performs surgery is one thing. Scaling a robot and again, miniaturization or smaller format, but you still have this install, you still have the service, you still have the clinical bedside support, all of that. As a founder, how do you manage that thought process? And I know we've got to take one step before the other, but do you ever lay up at night thinking about, okay, I'm going to get this robot to work, it's going to crush it clinically, safety, check, but then we have to scale. So that is an entire new initiative after you prove the robot works as well as current standard of care or better.
Well, I can tell you, there is no better way to appreciate what others have done before you than when you try to walk in their shoes. And the problem of creating a scalable, large, and in my opinion, reliable organization that has been done by our predecessors in robotic surgery is not a small thing to do. As a chief medical officer, I lay up at night worrying about clinical outcomes, surgeon satisfaction, safety, and value. And I have a crack team of business experts, including my CEO, John Murphy, who you know, who I am certain is worried about just the thing you said. Let me tell you what the CMO says at those meetings. John, we should just give the robot away. And I'm sure people will be so happy to use it, they'll reward us in the end. That's my view of it. Of course, that's not a business view of it, and I say it tongue in cheek. But there's no question that currently, for the trial, we are really building the robots individually. We're not mass producing them right now. And so that cannot, of course, continue if and when the FDA gives us clearance. And so those are the things that you have to get right, and they're not easy to do.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, thank you for sharing the virtual incision journey, and certainly I love always hearing from my surgeon founders and co-founders, because it's a different perspective, and it's a lot more about clinical sort of value than necessarily business outcomes in that order. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Joe. Always a pleasure to catch up.
You got it. Chat soon. I'm Joe Mullings from SDTS in Houston. Be well.